When I started my career in documentary filmmaking, I admired those thriving in the industry. I was right where you are, dreaming big and scared of stumbling. Years later, I went from distributing my very first documentary to filming in over 35 countries. And now, this podcast is where we share skills, stories, and lessons with filmmakers, including those who won Oscars and Emmys, to help each other grow and create impactful documentaries. Welcome to another episode of How We Film podcast. Today with me, I have a guy that usually I would say is not well respected when you're a young filmmaker in the filmmaking world because he's a dubbing mixer. His name is Sam Castleton. Sam, welcome to How We Film. How are you?
Hello. Good, thank you. How are you?
All good, man. I am really excited about this episode, Sam, because as I said, especially when you're a filmmaker and you're starting, all you look at is the images, how cool the shot it is, the nice camera movement. Then when you go into it and you start filming, and then you realize that you go edit your footage, and it doesn't sound as great, then all the beauty that you have, it loses the value. And so that's why I wanted to talk with you today. My
Okay.
hope is that we can go a little bit more over your career. What does it look like? And yeah, and just touch on many points. Why don't you introduce yourself and you tell me a little bit about you, yourself, your background in audio
Sure.
mixing.
My name's Sam Castleton. I'm a dub mixer in England. I just got into music and at a very early age started DJing, doing a bit of producing, went to do music technology at university, got a work experience as a runner at a post house in West London that did BBC stuff, saw someone doing the job I do now and thought, wow, I want to do that. And that was that basically. Just worked very hard, got a bit lucky as you need in this industry sometimes. And yeah, that's how I've sort of got to where I am today, basically.
Oh wow! So you started as a DJ.
Yeah,
That
well,
was
as a
that was
DJ, I got my first set of decks at like 12 or something. I was very young. Yeah, I loved getting vinyl, going to the record shop. Did sort of house and trance stuff at that time. And yeah, I kept it up till my sort of 30s. But it just got too expensive a hobby, basically. But that's how I start. Yeah, that's how I sort of started getting into music and sound, and then I started making my own stuff, and then mastering other people's stuff online, and sort of got into the EQ and compression and stuff like that. A lot of the skills that I use today.
And Sam, would you say that, because I am assuming as a DJ there is also a creative aspect of it? Would you say that when you compare that to what you do right now, the approach is a little bit different because your approach now has to be a little bit more technical, or there is still an aspect
Yeah,
of creativity in what you do?
there's definitely a sort of like live aspect. So when you're DJing, it's all live, it's going out like that. And although I can sort of go back in film and TV, and I often do, of course, it's still a bit of a performance with a big mixing console. So there's a similarity there. They are creative in the same way ish, because when you're DJing, it's not your songs, and when you're mixing, it's not your film. So you're sort of adjusting and trying to make it as good as possible, basically. Yeah, I've never really thought too much about that actually until this very point. So it's kind of interesting to talk about.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, because no, you made a good point though, because it's true. Like when you are a DJ, the creativity doesn't come to create something new, but it's more of
Mm.
like you create out of other sources and other musics and the way that you work with those. I guess the concept, the principle is probably the same, but then it changes because, like, I guess you also have a client there that requires specific things, and there is like you trying to understand what does the client wants and how you can give your input into that, I guess.
Yeah,
Right?
and that's why I kind of say it's a performance, because when you're DJing, it's to a crowd who are listening straight away, and then when it's when you're in here, it's, you've got the client behind, or it's not usually just one client, a director. I've, sometimes got 8 people in here behind my shoulder. So you're on the spot in the same way.
Yeah, I imagine that's a lot of pressure. Can you give me a description of your job and what do you do exactly in the filmmaking,
Okay,
like in the filmmaking world, but in the audio part of the filmmaking world?
sure. So my job is to get all the different elements of the sound from all from different sources. So we have the location dialogue, the location recorded sound. We have the music from the composer. We have the Foley from the Foley team, the sound effects from the sound effects editor, sound designer, sometimes voiceover as well, ADR.
Mm.
So all these different elements, I get them all together, and they're kind of in a tidy mess, if that makes any sense. They're all in the right place, but they're all a bit all over the place. And my job is to put them, make it all as smooth, as natural as possible. And then within that, there's lots of ways you can shape and mold the film.
So let's say that you receive a new job, right? So you need to put all these elements together in
Mm-hmm.
on the timeline. Like, do
Mm-hmm.
you have a time before the client actually comes in the studio, to listen to what you created?
Whoever the showrunner is, the creative, I just call them the client from now on.
Mm.
Whoever that person is who's making the creative decisions, I talk to them very early. I don't just have them come into the dub and it's like, here you go. Um, we have spotting sessions. We ask about what the film is, what the mood is, what the tone is, what they want to achieve generally and in certain scenes. We'll go through the film time coded, and then I'll receive all these separate elements. Then I'll have a couple of days to get it in a shape that's listenable and it's not just going to blow your head off in certain ways. And then I get the clients in and we go through it together, scene by scene, break it apart, try things. So it's creative when they come in, but I don't just sort of have them come in and go, here's my work. Sometimes we do that for the quicker turnaround stuff that don't have that time or that budget. And obviously the risk there is that you can do something completely different that the director didn't want or didn't intend.
Mm. Yeah.
I'm doing a thing at the moment in Antarctica, and the director wants the wind to sound really piercing and like harsh. But maybe I'll work with someone else, and they're like, no, I want it to be really soft and smooth and beautiful. That we're trying to like make Antarctica sound inviting. So you could do so much you can shape the picture so much with the sound, and you don't want to do the wrong thing. But like I say, time and budgets, sometimes you need to do that. And if you've just got like a talking head documentary, then maybe that's fine.
Yeah, it's more when you have other elements or you're trying to really, I don't know, express whatever is going on, especially in the nature or in I don't know, in an environment where there's potentially a lot of different sounds and you want to
Mm-hmm.
recreate a specific mood with that. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, the best analogy I always say
Mm.
is that the sound is like pulling focus. So, you know, um, we can have a really uh, something really crazy going on. You'll see it, maybe it's a sports documentary or something, and we'll dip out all the atmos and all the music, and it goes silent, and we'll just hear the breathing, right? So then you're sort of focusing on that person as opposed to the environment they're in. You can, have a dog that tied to a kennel with a chain, and maybe it's in the background, but if we have that sound, then it will draw your eye to it. It will draw your attention to it. So it's like pulling focus. We're sort of deciding where the audience looks some ways, but it sounds sort of more interesting than that because there's so many layers and they still hit your subconscious. There's been lots of scientific studies on stuff like that. It's quite interesting.
Oh, really?
So you could, yeah, just all sorts of things. So if you listen to fast music in the car, you'll drive faster. If you listen to something, like a drone, you'll feel scared. So or maybe it's the when you can have meditation and the bowls, the singing bowls, and it calms you, so that's just a frequency, it's literally a sound frequency. And it's what's really cool about sound is it's physically touching you. It's leaving, it's a
Mm.
speaker and touching your audience. So it's the point I'm making, sorry, is that you can have sound reach your viewer. They might not recognize it, something about it consciously, but it will still reach them subconsciously, and you can play with that later in your film as well if you want, which is quite cool.
Yeah, the way you described it sounds so beautiful that you make me want to become a dub mixer now. Like, it's like, because like it's beautiful the way you described it, because it is true. You don't necessarily think about that as you're watching a movie. You don't think about these things when you watch a movie.
Yeah, no, you don't, and that's what's cool about it, and that's what's cool about film and TV. Directors are very, and humans generally, but especially directors. They're visual beings, and sound
Mm,
people. We speak a kind of different language, or we tap into a different
that's
power.
true.
So it's your film is 50% picture and 50% sound. So it's the coming together of that that's really beautiful.
Can you tell me first of all, like a little bit about, you transition from DJ into this world of, like, doing something that is, I mean, creative, but it's different, right?
Yeah.
And how did you get into it? But what were your early influences? Did you have mentors around you, people, or you started to notice now? I'm assuming, I don't know. You started to notice,
Yeah.
all these things as you were watching movies, or there were people helping you and saying, you should listen to this, you should do this, you should practice this.
Yeah, all of the above. A very early influence for me was natural history show for BBC by David Attenborough called Planet Earth.
Mm,
It's mixed by Graham Wild in Bristol, who was a real sort of hero of mine.
mm,
Worked on all the big natural history stuff basically, and it was a huge project, and that was a real inspiration for me. At the cinema, a few years later after that, there was Tron Legacy, the Disney film, and it's a funny film, but the sound in that is just absolutely next level. It's absolutely incredible, and the location recordings were really bad. They have lights on their suits, and they gave off a buzz, so they had to remove all the buzz. And yeah, so that I had lots of early influences like that. And when I started, like I say, I started as a work experience as a post-production company, and I was lucky in many ways. I mean, you have to work very hard and have the skill set, of course, but I was lucky that a position opened up for me in the first place. And
mm.
I was also lucky because there was 4 other mixers there in house, and they were great mentors to me and teachers. And that's young people, early in their career. They really need mentors and people to show them ropes and show them what works and what doesn't work.
And would you say when, like, I imagine, like, when you enter, there is like different level where you enter as a junior, but then, they start to give you more complicated jobs, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I just started. My first job was it was like a daytime TV show called Animal Park.
Okay.
But it was great for me. It was every single day, 5 days a week. So I was kind of like learning every day, getting feedback from the other mixers every day. I actually loved the show. It was a great little show with Kate Humble and Ben Fogle, who always do good stuff. Yeah, and so yeah, that was my first. But for them, it was kind of like, oh, you can have that one. But for me, I was like, oh, this is amazing. Like, and when you have something that can kind of also, it's like you're getting the whole series. Like you can really make it your own. I was quite
Mm.
proud of that.
Yeah. I remember, especially when I started working for bigger clients, uh, I I can remember some memories of things that I messed up big times and I got myself in trouble. Like,
Hmm.
um, but also there were moments where there were moments where, there was either like somebody showing me something, or they had a great impact on me in a good way that totally changed the way I worked. Do you remember any of stories like that, whether good or bad, that had an impact on you in your early days?
Um, well, I'm sure there's been many. Trying to hark my brain back to all of them is difficult. Actually, I think a lot of the lessons I've learned aren't from people in sound, and they are editors and directors, and
Mm,
that's the bit that's been really. That's where I've learned probably the most, actually, especially later on in my career, in terms of what works and what doesn't work, um, and also, it's not actually about what works and what doesn't work. It's about what you want to achieve at a certain moment, and there's actually multiple different ways of achieving that thing.
mm,
Um, but yeah, I've learned lots from different people that way. Like I say, the way you can mold the music, actually, and like I say, just taking stuff out. As long as you understand the core fundamentals of storytelling, or what a particular scene or a particular moment is trying to do and achieve,
mm, mm.
then that's the most important part. And then implementing that, there's lots of different ways you do that, and I've learnt those through colleagues and my mentors, like I say. But actually trying to really get down to the core of the thing that you're doing is about what are we trying to do here. And
Mm.
that's where I learn a lot from directors and editors and producers. Oh no, with this we want to really focus on this person, or
Yeah.
we want it to be on this from this perspective. And like I said,
That's
a
a,
lot of the time it's just taking stuff out. There's far too much music and stuff. I think that's that's like one thing. Like, I mean, that's a classic one for me. I'm always like, well, what are we doing with this music at this particular point? What is its purpose?
mm,
And often it's not. They're like, I don't know. It's sort of, we just had it, always had it there. I'm like, well, let's get rid of it. Like, let's listen to it without and see what we think. And suddenly it makes you focus more on the dialogue, or whatever it is, and it can be way more powerful. And then when the music comes in, the music then is more powerful as well, and it has more purpose itself. So, sorry, I went off on
yeah.
a bit of a tangent there
No, no,
about
no. I love it.
storytelling,
No, I love it. No, I love
but
it. It's interesting. You're touching a very beautiful point. As a filmmaker, you have to understand. Like, I mean, you know this. You've been working with many of them. But when I come in, I come with the storytelling, and I think that the storytelling is the structure and the visuals. I don't think like, then it's like, and then we're gonna somehow put some nice music there that is gonna help sustain the story.
Mhm.
But the way you've been talking is the first time I hear somebody talking in this way, where you actually like, like you as as somebody that works with audio is thinking exactly as I'm thinking about the film. This is the first time it's happening to me. Like, and especially when it comes to when you say, what are we trying to do here in this scene? I think that not many people necessarily realize that even audio people actually focus on that, and they should focus on that. It makes sense to me. I just never heard it the same way that you phrase it that way, and I think that's really really powerful and also interesting.
Yeah,
I
well, my goal is to understand what the film is doing, what and how I can emphasize that and help that, basically. And like I said, there's multiple different ways of doing that, and I have to get into the creator's head and
mm,
understand,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
what it is we're trying to do here. And then I have the experience and the skill set to sort of uh, emphasize that or push that. And sometimes as well, it's I like I say, it's a collaborative process. We touched on this a bit earlier. Sorry, about collaboration.
Ah,
Oftentimes I'd be like, hey, have you thought about doing this? This might be a better way of
mm.
achieving that. um yeah, so it's collaborative.
When you work on something, and let's say you have that approach, right? You look at what are we trying to achieve in this scene, and you're trying to build that up. I'm curious to know how much trends influence also your decision making. I guess I understand that you also have a client there that has specific, taste, specific requests. But how much in general, in your opinion, like trends influence, the way you make decisions over your work with audio?
Trends, you mean something that's sort
Means
of in fashion at the
in
time?
fashion at the time, yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Do you usually look at that, or are you influenced by you're not necessarily conscious about it, or?
no, I'm conscious about it, but it's actually conscious about it in trying to avoid it. So I don't want it to be cliche. Um,
Mm,
so let's the text comes up. Let's have a typewriter. There's a photo still. Let's have a camera flash. And certain things can start to get a bit tiresome. And I always want to make stuff as fresh or as interesting as possible. And by repeating trends or whatever the fashion is at the time
mm.
is not a good way of doing that, really. I mean, stuff, what works, that's fine. But, if your film is a certain genre that's a well-trodden path, say a true crime would be a good one at the moment, then it's
Mm.
good to with the sound, try and get a new angle and try and do something new to sort of keep the viewer's attention as opposed to hitting the same formats and doing the same things.
Yeah, I feel it's the same when it comes to the way you write the script for whether it's a documentary, a short, a feature. I feel like the reason why I wanted to ask that is because I see how many, not how many people, I guess it's probably, I don't know, it's probably the easiest thing to do, or it comes natural because it's exciting, it's new. You want to try that out. I don't even know if it's still a trend, but I guess like in the last year or two, you've seen a lot of revisiting the 80s, right? In the
Yeah.
mood, in the music, in this and
Yeah.
that. Maybe before, I guess, 10 years ago, it was the 70s in a certain way.
Well, actually, it's a really interesting point you raise, and I think it's more of a problem these days, and that's because of the algorithm. The algorithm says this works, and there's always been a
Mm.
bit of that with commissioning, like, oh, we want to do this, we think this sort of idea will hit the audience, but now you've got a computer that's sort of like backing that up with data, and so what you get is the same stuff a lot of the time. Or it's a different story and that's great, but the visuals and the sound, or the way it's told is exactly the same. So and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but for me, always want to try and get an angle. It can be in that mold, but try and slant it somewhere else.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the trend of what's in fashion is not gonna stand, you know, uh, as much as a good storytelling or a good audio work that is not dependent on that because it's a momentary thing. And it's
Hmm.
interesting to me how that is also affecting somehow. I guess it's normal, if I think it's been happening
Yeah.
since, I don't know, since forever maybe. Like there is a
Yeah.
trend and you try to follow that. But then when
Yeah.
I try to analyze when you look back at the work, it's, to me, the work that has been, whether it's a movie, whether it's a piece of album, whether it's a nice work with sound mix, it has never been dependent on those trends. There was something unique. There was out of like an intuition from whoever worked on that was not dependent on what was trendy at that time, which is very different to me. So I was just curious to see how much of that how much of, yeah, you have to deal with that, or how much you work with that. So I'm glad you don't do it. Let's put it that way. I'm glad you don't do it. What would you say is the most rewarding part of your job? When you arrive at the end of the day, it's like,
um,
oh man, this felt so good. What is that?
yeah. I think there's a few parts. Like I say, try and get in contact with the clients early and doing spotting sessions and watching the film. Like I love that. Get the real creative juices going and gets you excited about the project. When I'm mixing it and everything's coming together, often we'll have like an amazing sound effects sequence and the music's swelling and you're just sort of like, yeah, this is cool. This is cinematic and it's immersive and you're just like so in it. I love that. I get a real buzz from that. And then also, when you watch it, when you watch it through the client at the end, and it all at the when it's all come together, or sometimes that can be a stressful process if you've not got time and money, and you're sort of like, oh fuck, I need to fix this, I need to fix that. But usually it's sort of going, oh well, look, look what we've done together. It's really, that's also rewarding.
That's cool. That's cool. It's amazing, and the reason why I wanted to do this podcast is because I hope I can feel what filmmakers will want to hear and what they need to hear. In the back of my mind, I have like 100 conversations that I remember, and they come one
Right,
after
okay.
another one, right? And I'm like, oh, they need to listen to this as I am listening now. And so I then, that sparkles so many questions. But I wanted to thank you for at least give us like a general overview over what you do, the way you do it, your approach, and all of that. And yeah, Sam, I really, really appreciate you being here.
No
I
worries.
cannot
Anytime I
thank you
can talk
enough.
about sound is good. Thank you. It's been
Thank you so much.
pleasurable
Thank
talking
you.
to you.
Thank you.
Filmmaking is 50% audio, 50% video. That's such a good reminder. I really needed that. I think I tend to forget, even to this day, I tend to forget that. And talking with Sam was really helpful for that reason. I have more questions on, how AI can help, in the sound mixing process. At which point, for example, somebody like Sam has to come in the production. And Sam is gonna answer all these questions in the next episode. So check that out, subscribe, and activate notification in order to not miss that out. Also, if you have specific questions over documentary production or distribution, don't forget that we have a specific section on howwefilm.com. You just need to go there, submit your questions. I'll do my best to give you the answer in a specific video. And at the end, if you want to learn more specifically sound mix DIY, we have a specific exclusive content on howwefilm.com. You just need to subscribe. It's free. You don't need to pay anything. And Sam is going to guide you through all the steps that he takes in order to do a good sound mix. He helps on how to organize all the pieces on the timeline and how you work with all of that. So check that out.